Mark was barefoot in his kitchen when his son came home. I remember that because Mark had one arm around my waist and the other reaching past me for the pepper grinder, which was how he moved through a kitchen when I was in it. He could have asked me to step aside. Instead, he treated my body like a piece of furniture he particularly liked. "You're blocking the drawer," he said. "You're holding me in front of the drawer. That sounds like blame. It's an observation." He kissed behind my ear. That made it harder to remember what I was observing. We had been dating 6 months, long enough that kissing him no longer felt miraculous, short enough that there were still moments when my body reacted before my brain caught up. Mark was 47, broad through the shoulders, warmer and louder than I was, with a habit of touching people he loved, as if affection became less trustworthy when left implied. I was 49 and taught ceramics at a community college. I spent most of my working life telling nervous adults to stop strangling clay and let the material tell them what it needed. I was less talented at applying that philosophy to people. I turned in Mark's arms. "You know, some people just ask for pepper." Terrible system. He kissed me properly. The rental van stopped outside before breakfast had a chance to become irrelevant. Mark went still, not embarrassed. Alert. Parents apparently did that forever. He looked toward the front window. "That's Zach." I checked the clock. 45 minutes early. "That's my boy." You say that like punctuality is a genetic defect. It is in this family. The second knock came before Mark reached the hallway. I stayed near the stove while he opened the door. Zach Brennan stood on the step with a cardboard box against his chest. At 25, he had Mark's height, but not his build. He was thinner, sharper through the face. With dark hair he had clearly pushed both hands through several times before arriving. Behind him, the rental van was packed badly enough to concern me, though I taught ceramics and had no professional authority over vans. "Hey," Zach said. Mark didn't answer immediately. He took the box, set it inside, then pulled his son into a hug. Zach made a sound that was half laugh, half protest. "Dad, box." Mark hugged him again. That time Zach let him. I looked at the eggs because some moments did not need a witness standing 6 feet away with a spatula. When I turned around again, Zach was inside. "Morning, Daniel." "Morning." His eyes moved from my bare feet to Mark's bare feet to the 2 plates on the counter. "I'm early." "A little. I can go sit in the van for 45 minutes. Mark frowned. Zach smiled. The joke did its job. Mark picked up the box. "I cleared the closet yesterday. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. I could have done it. After you got here?" "Yeah. So you could move your things into a room full of my things, then move my things out." Zach looked at me. 6 hours back in Baltimore, and we've already reached Brennan Logistics. 5 minutes. "Sorry, time moves differently here." Mark pointed upstairs. "Smartass." Zach followed him. I turned off the burner. The spare room had never belonged to me. That mattered. But over the previous 2 months, Mark and I had started making the kind of jokes couples made when a future had become possible enough to tease. I had complained once that my apartment was too small for a proper pottery wheel. Mark had said, "There's a whole room upstairs currently devoted to a broken exercise bike and Christmas decorations." I told him that was the least romantic cohabitation proposal I had ever heard. He said, "I can put candles around the exercise bike." We had laughed. Nothing had been decided. Still, when I heard furniture scraping upstairs, I realized I had quietly begun imagining that room as available. Not mine. Available. There was a difference. Mark came back down first. He brought more stuff than I expected. How much did you expect? 1 suitcase and a wounded expression. That would have been easier to carry. He leaned against the counter while I slid eggs onto plates. The worry in his face softened when he looked at me. "You okay?" The question caught me off guard. Why wouldn't I be? He shrugged. "Change of plans. Your son moving home because his business collapsed is slightly more important than my breakfast logistics." That wasn't what I asked. I looked at him. Mark had a habit of asking direct questions and then waiting, as if silence belonged to him too. I'm fine. It was true. Mostly. He kissed my temple and took one of the plates. Zach came downstairs carrying an extension cord. Any chance the basement outlet still works? Mark said. What are you plugging in? A lamp. You need an extension cord for a lamp? It's a very ambitious lamp. Zach. My monitor. I thought you sold the monitor. I sold the good one. Mark closed his eyes briefly. I concentrated on the eggs. There it was. A version of Mark I knew existed but rarely saw. With me, he was generous without being intrusive, decisive without needing to run the room. With Zach, old circuitry came back online. What else did you keep? Dad, I'm asking, and I'm unpacking. You said most of the equipment went back. Most did. Most isn't a number. Zach set the extension cord down. I know what numbers are. The room tightened. Mark opened his mouth. I touched 2 fingers lightly to his wrist. Not to silence him. Just enough that he looked at me. The eggs are dying. Zach glanced at the plates. They had a good run. Mark exhaled. We ate. It wasn't awkward exactly. It was too full for awkwardness. Zach talked about the commercial print shop where he was starting Monday. Second shift for the first month. Better money and worse humanity. Mark asked too many questions about benefits. Zach answered half of them. I asked what kind of work he would actually be doing. That changed him. His shoulders lowered. He explained the presses, the finishing line, the difference between the work he had wanted to make in his own screen printing shop and the kind of high-volume production he would be doing now. He was good at explaining it. That surprised me. Not because I thought he was incompetent. I just knew him mostly as Mark's son, the adult child who visited every few weeks, stole sparkling water from the refrigerator, and made merciless fun of his father's reading glasses. Now I saw the man who had built something, failed at it, and was trying to talk about the next job without making it sound like punishment. How long do you think you'll need? Mark asked. There was a pause. Zach stared at his plate. Maybe a month. Mark nodded too fast. A month's easy. I said nothing. A month did not sound plausible. I knew almost nothing about Zach's debt, but I had taught adults long enough to recognize the particular optimism people used when the real number frightened them. Zach knew too. I could tell by the way he did not look at either of us. But some truths had to be reached, not handed over. We spent 4 hours moving boxes. Zach refused help until the 3rd trip upstairs, then stopped refusing, because refusal required energy he no longer had. Mark found a plastic tub of screen printing tools. Basement? No. Why not? Because they're mine. I know they're yours. Then why are you asking where to put them? By 3 in the afternoon, I had learned that fatherhood could turn 2 intelligent adult men into litigators arguing over storage bins. It was strangely reassuring. Mark wasn't infinitely patient. He got defensive. He pushed. Sometimes he asked questions after he had already decided the answer he wanted. At one point, Zach said, "You're doing the face." Mark frowned. What face? That face. I have one face. You have 40 faces. I laughed before I could stop myself. Mark looked at me. You're supposed to be on my side. I'm not joining whatever this is. Zach pointed at me. Smart man. Mark gave me a wounded look so theatrical that I wanted to kiss him. That was new too. Not the wanting. The context. I had seen Mark competent, affectionate, angry at traffic, exhausted after a 12-hour shift, half asleep with his mouth against my shoulder. I had not seen him irritated with someone he loved so completely that the love itself was never in question. There was something intimate about witnessing that. By dinner, Zach's boxes occupied the upstairs hall, half the dining room, and one corner of the living room. Mark ordered pizza. I stayed. Afterward, Zach went upstairs to assemble a desk. For the first time all day, Mark and I stood alone in the kitchen, without carrying anything. He leaned against the counter. You really okay? You asked me that already. You gave me a suspicious answer. What made it suspicious? It was very fast. That's discrimination against efficient communicators. He held out a hand. I went to him. His palm settled at my waist. Mine rested against his chest. For a few seconds, the house disappeared. I kissed him. Mark kissed me back hard enough to remind me how little privacy we had enjoyed that day. My hand moved into his hair. Then footsteps hit the stairs. We separated quickly, but not quickly enough. Zach stopped in the doorway. "Oh God," Mark sighed. "It's my house." "I know. That somehow makes it worse." "You came downstairs." I needed a charger. I did not need a memory. I laughed into Mark's shoulder. Zach grabbed a cable from beside the toaster. "I'm going back upstairs. Please never acknowledge this." When he disappeared, Mark looked at me. "Stay tonight." It came out immediately. I almost said yes. That was what I normally did. Then I pictured the boxes in the hall, the footsteps overhead, the bathroom door opening and closing, a house trying to become something new before any of us understood what that meant. I kissed Mark once. "I think I'm going home." His expression changed only slightly. "Okay." "I'm not mad. I didn't say you were." "I know." That was the first moment I felt it. Not conflict, not distance. Just the small, unfamiliar fact that going home meant something now. I picked up my jacket. Mark walked me to the door and kissed me goodnight, as if nothing important had changed. Maybe nothing had. But when I stepped outside, I looked back at the second-floor window. The spare room light was on. For the first time since Mark and I had started joking about a future, the room was no longer empty. By the second week, Zach's boxes had stopped looking temporary. That was how I knew the arrangement was becoming real. His work boots developed a permanent place beside the back door. A cracked mug appeared near Mark's sink and stayed long enough to become part of the kitchen. Mail arrived with Zach's name on it. Mark adjusted first. Of course he did. He could make routine out of almost anything. By Wednesday, he knew Zach's shift schedule, which nights he would be home for dinner, and which bus route he took when his car was being difficult. I adjusted differently. I went home more. Not dramatically. I still saw Mark. We had dinner twice that week. He stayed at my place Friday. I slept at his Sunday because Zach worked late. But the automatic nights disappeared. Before Zach came back, I had sometimes ended up at Mark's house without deciding to. We would finish dinner. One of us would put on music. Eventually, Mark would glance at the clock. "You staying?" Most of the time I did. Now I thought about it first. On Friday night, Mark stood in the middle of my apartment and looked around as if he had not seen it in months. He had been there 8 days earlier. "You're staring at my lamp." "I'm appreciating your lamp." "You hate that lamp." "I hate where you put it." That sounds less like appreciation. He hung his jacket over the back of a chair. Something in my chest loosened. My apartment was small, but it was quiet. No television upstairs, no front door opening, no father-son conversation happening 3 rooms away while Mark tried to pretend he was listening to me. Just Mark. He caught me looking. "What?" "Nothing. You're doing the face." "What face?" "Apparently I have 40. You have 3. I'm very efficient." He crossed the room. I barely put down my glass before he had both hands at my waist. The kiss was not gentle. That surprised me. There was something impatient about him that night, as if he had also been counting interruptions. I pulled him closer. His hands slipped beneath the back of my shirt. The apartment was suddenly too quiet, in the best possible way. When we finally separated, Mark laughed. "What? I forgot how quiet it is here." "You say that like my apartment is a monastery." "It isn't. You complained about my upstairs neighbor vacuuming at midnight. That was before my son came home with 3 alarm clocks. He uses all 3? He sleeps through all 3. That seems inefficient. I'm considering violence." I kissed him again. Later, we ate takeout on the floor, because Mark claimed my couch had been designed by someone who hated human spines. He complained about work. I told him about a student who had accidentally made a bowl shaped exactly like Ohio. That's not possible. It happened. On purpose? No. Can you sell it? She cried. That feels like a no. There were no difficult conversations. We simply had a good night. I slept better than I had in days. The next afternoon, Mark stood near my front door pulling on his shoes. Come over tomorrow? I hesitated for half a second. He noticed. Dinner, he added. Zach's working until 10. That sounds suspiciously like scheduling around your child. He's 25. Then your adult child. Does that make me sound younger? No. He gave me a look. I smiled. Yeah, dinner. His expression softened. It should not have made me feel guilty. It did. Sunday afternoon, I arrived at Mark's and found Zach at the dining table with a calculator, 3 envelopes, and the expression of a man being personally insulted by arithmetic. Mark stood over him. Already a bad sign. I'm not taking the money, Zach said. I didn't say you had to take anything. You said you could pay off the card. That is taking money. I said I could pay it off, and you could repay me without the interest. That's still you paying it. Mark glanced at me. Not exactly for rescue. For reinforcement. I took off my coat very slowly. Zach noticed. Don't drag Daniel into this. I'm not dragging anyone. You looked at him. I'm allowed to look at my boyfriend. I'm going to regret coming through this door, I said. Zach pushed the calculator away. Mark picked it up. What's the minimum payment? Dad. What? I'm handling it. You're paying 26% interest. I know. That's insane. I know. So let me help. Zach stood. You keep saying help like it ends the conversation. Mark's face changed. I had seen that look in the classroom when a student refused advice they had asked for. The part of me trained to manage a room wanted to step in. I didn't. This wasn't my room. Zach went upstairs. Mark stared at the abandoned envelopes. I sat across from him. He's being stupid. Possibly. You agree with him? I didn't say that. You're doing that teacher thing. What teacher thing? Where you refuse to answer because you want me to hear myself. Offensive stereotype. You do it constantly. Only when necessary. He looked at the envelopes. I can fix this in one payment. I know. He'd pay me back. I know. Then why is everybody acting like I'm trying to buy his kidneys? I smiled despite myself. I don't think anyone thinks that. Daniel. I stopped smiling. Mark rubbed one hand over his face. For the first time, I saw what sat beneath the irritation. Fear. Not fear that Zach would fail again. Fear that Mark would have to watch it happen while possessing the means to prevent part of it. Do you want him to owe less money? I asked. Or do you want to make sure he doesn't feel this anymore? Mark looked at me. That sounds like one of your questions. It is. I hate your questions. You date me voluntarily. Poor judgment. Upstairs, something heavy moved across the floor. He came home, I said. I noticed. He took the job. Yes. He's paying you rent. Barely. He's trying. Mark leaned back. I know. There was no revelation in that. He knew. He just didn't like what knowing required. Zach came downstairs 20 minutes later with a cheap yellow legal pad covered in numbers. He sat without asking either of us to leave. Fine. Mark straightened. I'm not taking the money. Mark opened his mouth. Zach raised a hand. But I did the actual math. That seems promising. Don't. He pushed the pad across the table. I return the last leased press next week. I still owe the termination fee. The card is worse than I thought, because I used it for payroll in February. Mark stared at him. You used personal credit for payroll? I know. How much? Zach told him. Mark swore. Zach looked at me. You can swear too if you want. I'm saving mine. The joke disappeared quickly. Zach kept talking. Card. Equipment. Back taxes. Car. Minimum contribution to Mark. If he worked full-time and picked up occasional Saturdays, He could reduce the worst debt aggressively. If he moved out too soon, he would barely make progress. Mark asked, "How long?" Zach looked down. 8 months. Mark said nothing. Maybe 10. That was the moment the room changed. Not because anybody moved. Because month had stopped meaning temporary. 8 months was a season. 10 months was almost a year. Mark's eyes moved toward me. I knew what he was thinking. The spare room. My lease. The jokes we had made. The version of the future neither of us had committed to, but both of us had started keeping space for. Zach misread the silence. "I can find a roommate sooner." Mark looked back at him. "No. I can." "No. If staying here gets you out of the hole faster, you stay. I'm not taking money." "I didn't say money. You're already charging me nothing. I'm charging you $300. That is nothing. It covers food and utilities. Dad, it's enough." Zach looked at me. "You're the only neutral person here." "I am absolutely not neutral." Mark glanced at me. That landed harder than I expected. Zach seemed to understand. "Right." The room grew quiet. Finally, Mark said, 8 months is fine." Zach shook his head. "It isn't fine." "No, the situation isn't fine. You staying here is." That was Mark. That was what I loved about him. He could be overbearing and irritating, and too fast to solve. But when the important sentence arrived, he rarely missed it. Zach stared at the legal pad. "Okay." Mark reached toward him, then stopped. "Small thing. Probably nobody else would have noticed." I did. He let Zach sit there without touching him. Without fixing him. That night, after Zach left for work, Mark cooked pasta. He was quieter than usual. I watched him grate too much cheese over both plates. "You're thinking very loudly." 8 months. Possibly 10. Helpful. I'm a teacher. You're a menace. We ate. Halfway through dinner, Mark said, "Your lease is up when?" I kept my eyes on the plate. "September." That's what I thought. Nothing unusual in his voice. That made the question more dangerous. "Still a while." "Yeah." Then he smiled, small and almost careless. "You could always stop paying rent eventually." A month earlier, I would have joked back. Something about candles around the exercise bike. Instead, I took another bite. Mark noticed. I saw him notice. Neither of us said anything. The lease renewal arrived on a Tuesday. The envelope had my apartment number written in blue ink and a grease stain near the corner. For almost 10 years, signing one had been automatic. Read the increase. Complain privately. Sign. Done. That year, I sat at my kitchen table for 20 minutes without touching the pen. My apartment was objectively unimpressive. 1 bedroom. Bad storage. A bathroom vent that sounded like a helicopter trying to leave the building. The windows faced another row house close enough that I knew when the man across the alley bought new curtains. I loved it. That irritated me. For the first 3 months Mark and I dated, I liked returning there because the relationship was new and the apartment was familiar. By month 6, Mark's house had become familiar too. My toothbrush was there. A sweater I kept forgetting. 2 mugs I had bought because Mark owned only 6 and somehow considered that sufficient. There had been nights when I looked around his living room and thought, not unhappily, I could live here. I had never told him. I had never told myself very clearly either. Then Zach came home. The spare room filled. The upstairs bathroom acquired a schedule. The kitchen acquired arguments. Mark's evenings bent around another person again. And instead of feeling disappointed that cohabitation might be delayed, I had felt relief. That was harder to admit. The renewal required 12 months. Not until Zach moved out. Not 3. 12. I got up and walked around the apartment as if the answer might be hidden in the furniture. Mark's t-shirt hung over the back of my desk chair. He had left it Friday. I picked it up. It smelled faintly like his detergent, and something simply him. I smiled before I could stop myself. That mattered. I did not want less Mark. I wanted this room too. The silence. The ugly lamp he hated. The kitchen where nobody opened the refrigerator while I was kissing someone. A place where Mark arrived because we had chosen to see each other, not because our routines had fused until neither of us remembered choosing. I signed, then sat with my hand still on the pen and felt as if I had done something much larger than renew an apartment with bad plumbing. I told Mark that evening, not because he asked. That mattered too. We were walking toward the harbor after dinner. I renewed my lease today. Mark took 3 more steps before stopping. For another year? Yeah. He looked at me. People moved around us. A cyclist rang a bell somewhere behind my shoulder. Mark put his hands into his jacket pockets. Okay. I hated the word immediately. Not because it was wrong, because it was careful. You can say more than okay. I'm trying not to say the wrong thing first. That's fair. He looked toward the water. Were you planning to tell me before you signed? Yes. That's not what I asked. Heat rose in my face. No. He nodded once. That hurt more than anger would have. I didn't think I needed permission. I didn't say permission. I know. Do you? The question came out sharper than everything before it. Mark exhaled. Sorry. No. It's fine. It clearly isn't. We started walking again, because standing still made the conversation feel formal. For a block, neither of us spoke. Then Mark said, I thought we were talking about you maybe moving in. We were joking about it. We were joking because we were talking about it without talking about it. That sounds healthy. He gave me a look. Sorry. I'm not asking you to move in tomorrow. I know. Or when Zach moves out. I know. You keep saying that. Because I do know. Then what am I missing? Actual confusion. That made it harder. I like my apartment. Mark waited. That's it? No. Okay. The careful tone again. I like having somewhere that's mine. I like having somewhere that's mine. His expression shifted. Mine as opposed to what? Mark. No. I'm asking. Your house isn't a problem. Then why are we talking like it is? We're not. You renewed for a year without telling me, after we spent months joking about you eventually not needing that place. They were jokes. Not entirely. I stopped. Neither of us had said that part. You actually thought I was going to move in. Eventually? Yeah. When? I don't know. Eventually. Zach just moved home for maybe 10 months. I know that. So this isn't exactly the time. I'm not asking you to do it now. I know. He looked frustrated. Not loud. Not angry. Just tired of hearing a word that answered nothing. I don't think this is about Zach, I said. His face changed completely. What does that mean? I looked at the pavement. It would have been easier if I knew. I think I still want my own place. For how long? I don't know. He laughed once without humor. That's apparently the answer tonight. I'm not trying to be difficult. I know. That was deliberate. I almost smiled. I didn't. I lived with someone for 14 years. I know. I don't think I understood what happened to me in that house until I left. What happened? Nothing dramatic. That doesn't answer it. I know. I shoved my hands into my coat pockets. We got good at being together. Mark frowned. That sounds terrible. It was, eventually. I took a breath. We had shared friends, shared routines, shared grocery lists, shared weekends. If I wanted to go somewhere alone, I explained why. If he wanted to eat without me, I noticed. If one of us changed plans, it became information about the relationship. Mark was quiet. Nobody did anything wrong. We just got so efficient at being a unit that I stopped knowing when I was choosing it. And you think that's what would happen with me? No. That was fast. I looked at him. You're the one who notices fast answers. Despite myself, I laughed. Barely. Then it disappeared. I don't think you're him. Good. I think I'm still me. That landed. Mark looked away. After another block, he said, I liked imagining you there. My chest tightened. Not because I wanted to reject it, because part of me wanted it too. On some nights. Not all. I like being there. That isn't the same. No. He nodded. At the next corner, he stopped. So what are we doing? The question scared me more than I expected. Dating. That's not what I mean. I know. Daniel. I looked at him. Mark's face was open in the terrible way it got when he stopped trying to make something easier. I'm not breaking up with you. I blinked. I didn't think you were. I need you to hear it anyway. Okay. But I also need time to understand what serious looks like if we're apparently not moving toward the same thing. The old part of me wanted to defend. To explain. To make sure he knew I loved him before he could interpret anything incorrectly. Instead I said, that's fair. It did not feel resolved. That was probably why it felt real. We walked toward his car. Our shoulders brushed twice before either of us reached for the other. At the crosswalk, Mark touched the back of my hand. Not reassurance. Just contact. I turned my palm over. He laced his fingers through mine. Still together. Still uncertain. At his car he asked, "You coming over?" I looked at him. He looked tired. I wanted to. I also wanted my own bed. Both were true. Not tonight. His jaw tightened for half a second. Then he nodded. Okay. This time, the words sounded different. Not acceptance. Not yet. Just space. I kissed him before I left. A real kiss. Long enough that neither of us could pretend the problem was desire. When I pulled away, Mark kept one hand at my waist. Friday? Friday. Then I went home to the apartment I had just promised myself for another year. For the first time, keeping it did not feel like protecting an exit. It felt like admitting what I wanted before somebody else could decide what that wanting meant. The apartment offer arrived 3 days later. Zach told us over dinner. My coworker has a place opening. Mark looked up immediately. What kind of place? Zach pointed his fork at him. See, this is why I almost didn't say anything. I asked one question. You asked it like a mortgage officer. I told myself to stay out of it. Mark looked at me anyway. No, I didn't say anything. You were about to. I was going to ask if the neighborhood was decent. That counts. Zach smiled. It's in Highlandtown. Mark frowned. Which street? Dad. I'm familiar with the city. So am I. Zach turned to me. His roommate is moving in with his girlfriend. He needs someone next month. How much? Zach told me. Not cheap. Not catastrophic. Utilities? Split. Deposit? He told me. Mark gave me a look. You're allowed to ask questions? I have a neutral face. You have never had a neutral face. Zach laughed. Then he put his fork down. I could do it. The room changed. Mark said nothing. I hated the small burst of hope that moved through me. There it was. An ugly little truth. I wanted Zach to take the apartment. Not because I disliked him. I didn't. Not because he had done anything wrong. He hadn't. I wanted the spare room empty. I wanted the upstairs quiet. I wanted Mark's house to stop functioning as evidence in a conversation neither of us knew how to finish. The shame arrived before anyone else had the chance. Zach said, I ran the numbers. Mark leaned back. And? I'd barely make the debt payments. Mark's hope, if he felt any, vanished faster than mine. Rent, utilities, insurance, food. I can cover it technically. That doesn't sound good. It isn't. So don't. Zach frowned. I didn't ask you. I know. You're doing it again. Mark opened his mouth. Stopped. I saw him make the effort. Zach noticed too. If I move next month, I'll probably add 5 or 6 months to the debt plan. Mark asked, carefully, what do you want? Zach made a face. I want not to live with my father at 25. That part I understand. I want my own place. Also understandable. And I want to stop making expensive decisions because I'm embarrassed. Mark went still. Zach rubbed his thumb along the edge of his plate. So I'm saying no. The clean exit was gone. I should have felt proud immediately. Instead, disappointment arrived first. Then guilt. Then pride. Human emotions were poorly organized. Mark nodded. Okay. Zach looked suspicious. That's it? That's it. You're not going to tell me it's the smart choice? I assumed you already knew. Zach narrowed his eyes. You're making progress. Eat your dinner. The conversation moved on. Mine did not. That night, Mark walked me to my car. We had not been alone once. Zach had been there. A neighbor stopped by, with misdelivered mail. Mark took a call from work. Nothing terrible happened. Still, by 9:30, I felt rubbed thin. Mark leaned against the passenger door while I found my keys. You're quiet. Tired. That's not all. He wasn't accusing. That made lying harder. I was hoping Zach would take the apartment. Mark's face didn't change. I was too. That surprised me. You were? Of course. The relief came so quickly I laughed. Mark smiled. What? I thought that made me terrible. It makes you a man who likes kissing his boyfriend without my son walking downstairs. That is one concern. I have several. He looked toward the house. I love him. I know. I'm glad he called. I know. I also want my house back. That helped more than it should have. I had been treating fatherhood as if it erased Mark's competing desires. It didn't. He was simply better at allowing them to coexist. Zach made the right decision, I said. Yeah. I still hate it. Also, yeah. We smiled at each other in the dark. For a few seconds, it was easy again. Then Mark said, "Come over Sunday." I hesitated. He noticed. Just us. Zach works until 6. Mark. What? You hear yourself, right? He frowned. I'm inviting you over. Because Zach won't be there. Yes. That's exactly what I mean. His expression hardened slightly. Daniel, I'm trying. I know. Then why does everything become evidence I'm doing it wrong? That's not what I said. It's what it feels like. I took a breath. Can we go somewhere? Sunday? Yes. Sure. Just not here. Mark looked toward the house. What is it about being inside that building that bothers you this much? I don't know. That answer is getting old. So is being asked for one before I have it. He pushed away from the car. Fine. The word was not fine. Mark. No. You want somewhere else. We'll go somewhere else. That sounds like punishment. You hear everything as pressure. And you hear every preference as rejection. He laughed once. Nothing warm in it. Great. We're doing this beside your car. We don't have to. That's your favorite solution lately. I stared at him. What does that mean? It means you leave. The words landed harder than they should have. I go home. You go home every time this house gets uncomfortable. It is my home. I know that. Then stop saying it like I'm abandoning you. I didn't. You implied it. Mark stepped closer. Not threatening, just frustrated enough that standing apart no longer worked. You renewed your lease. Yes. You sleep here less. Yes. You leave early. Sometimes, you ask me to come to your place instead, because we can actually be alone there. And every time I try to include you here, you act like I'm trying to assign you a bedroom and a tax dependent. I almost laughed. I was too angry. You include me in everything. You're my boyfriend. That doesn't mean I need to be present every time Zach orders dinner. Then say no. I do. After you come over, get uncomfortable and leave. That's unfair. Is it? Then tell me what you want before I have to watch you disappear. There it was. Not elegant. Not entirely fair. True enough to hurt. I want to miss you sometimes. Mark blinked. The sentence had escaped before I could improve it. That sounds terrible. I know. No, seriously. What am I supposed to do with that? I don't know. You want less time with me. No. You just said you want to miss me. Because I do. He stared at me. When we see each other every available hour, I stop feeling like I'm seeing you because I chose it. That makes no sense. It makes sense to me. Then explain it better. I can't right now. Mark looked away. I should have stopped. Instead, I said, you make every free hour communal. He turned back. And you vanish. The second communal becomes inconvenient. Silence. I hated him for saying it for about 3 seconds. Then I hated myself, because it was partly true. I grabbed the car door. Mark stepped back. Of course. I froze. What? You're leaving. I was already leaving. Right. Don't do that. Do what? Make me getting in my car the proof of your argument. You're doing a great job without me. That was the cruelest thing he had said to me in 6 months. My face went hot. Regret crossed his immediately. Daniel. No. I shouldn't have said that. No, you shouldn't have. I'm sorry. I know. I opened the door. He didn't stop me. That was good. If he had, I might have said something worse. I rolled down the window because apparently I still had one remaining piece of maturity. We're not breaking up. He looked almost offended. I know. Good. I'm still mad at you. I'm mad at you too. Okay. Okay. I drove home angry. That was different from driving home relieved. I noticed. 2 nights later, I went back. No invitation. No dinner plan. No guarantee Zach would be out. Mark opened the door in an old t-shirt with an expression that made it clear he hadn't expected me. Hi. Hi. Neither of us moved. Then I said, "Can I come in?" He stepped aside. The television was low. A laundry basket sat in the hallway. The house felt exactly as crowded and ordinary as before. My body wanted to turn toward the door. I stayed. Mark watched me take off my coat. I don't know how to explain all of it yet. Okay, but sometimes I need you without needing all of this. I gestured toward the house. Mark glanced at the laundry basket. My excellent decor? Especially that. His mouth twitched. I continued before humor could rescue me. And I know I don't say it soon enough. Mark nodded. I know. I'm trying. I know. Stop saying that. That got a real laugh. Small, tired, real. Mark did not touch me. For some reason, that made me want him to. So I crossed the room first. I put my hands at his waist. His expression changed. Hi, he said again. Hi. I kissed him. Not because we had solved anything, because staying through the unsolved part was apparently my work now. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. I heard it. This time, I did not leave. The first thing that changed was not Mark. It was me staying irritated. That sounds unimpressive. It wasn't. Before, irritation usually sent me toward an exit. I called it preventing escalation. Sometimes that was true. Leaving also meant I rarely had to sit beside someone I loved, while neither of us was especially pleasant. 2 nights later, Zach came home from work angry. He entered carrying a takeout container and dropped his keys into the bowl hard enough that Mark looked up from the couch. What happened? Nothing. That sounded like something. The finishing line jammed. Kevin blamed me because apparently I personally invented mechanical failure. Mark muted the television. Did your supervisor... Dad. Mark stopped. Zach rubbed both hands over his face. I don't want to talk about work. Okay. That should have been the end of it. 3 minutes later, Mark said, "You know, if the machine's been having issues, you should document." Zach stared at him. Mark closed his mouth. I looked very carefully at the television. Zach went upstairs. Mark looked at me. Don't. I haven't said anything. Your face is loud. I only have 3. You've developed a 4th. I smiled. Mark didn't. I'm trying not to help my own son. No, you're trying not to help him when he hasn't asked. That distinction feels designed by people who enjoy suffering. Probably therapists. Terrible profession. I leaned back. A month earlier I would have left. The house was tense. Mark was irritated. Zach was upstairs walking like the floorboards had offended him. Instead, I stayed. Not heroically. I was uncomfortable. I wanted my apartment. I also wanted Mark. Both existed at once. After a while, his hand found mine between us on the cushion. Neither of us looked over. That helped. At 9, Zach came downstairs carrying an empty plate. He stopped when he saw me still there. "You're still here. Should I be insulted?" "No. I just thought you usually left earlier." Mark's fingers tightened slightly around mine. Evidence that other people had noticed my pattern before I had fully admitted it. "I'm expanding my range." Zach nodded. "Good luck." He disappeared into the kitchen. Mark turned his head toward me. "Absolutely not. I didn't say anything." "You were about to." "I was going to say I like your range." "That's worse." He laughed. So did I. It was the first evening in weeks when the house felt crowded, without feeling hostile. The next Saturday was supposed to be ours. Mark had arranged it nearly 2 weeks earlier, which I knew because he had told Zach, told me, put it in his phone, and reminded both of us twice. No family dinner, no errands. No while we're out, just us. We drove north after breakfast and spent half the day in a town neither of us had reason to visit. There was a used bookstore Mark pretended to hate and spent 40 minutes inside. A small restaurant where we ate lunch too late. A waterfront path cold enough that I regretted not bringing gloves. Mark kept sliding his hand into my coat pocket when his fingers got cold. "You understand I'm not a heating device." "You're warm. That is not consent to become infrastructure. You teach ceramics. You love infrastructure. That makes no sense." It sounded convincing. "You've been spending too much time with Zach." Cruel. He kissed my cheek. It was easy again. Not because the house problem had disappeared, because for 4 hours we were not inside it. Around 3, Mark's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. "Zach." He answered immediately. "What happened?" A pause. "No. Slow down." I turned toward the water. "When?" Another pause. "Do you need?" He stopped. Something changed in his face. "What options do you have?" I looked back. Mark listened. "Okay." Another pause. "What's the second one?" He nodded. "That sounds annoying." Pause. "No, I'm not saying don't call me. I'm asking what you can do from there." His voice softened. "All right. Pick one. Text me when you've handled it." He hung up. "What happened?" "One of the last pieces of shop equipment was supposed to be picked up today. The shipping company moved the window, and now it overlaps with his shift. Can he fix it?" "He can ask his manager to move his start time, or pay the warehouse $25 to hold it until Monday." "That sounds fixable." "Yeah." We started walking again. After about 10 steps, I reached for his hand. Mark looked at me. "What?" "Nothing. Your nothing is suspicious. I'm holding your hand." I noticed. "Then enjoy it." He smiled. That was all. I didn't tell him I was proud. He didn't ask whether I noticed. He had simply stayed. Later that week, Zach and Mark had their own argument. I stopped by to pick Mark up for dinner. When he opened the door, Zach was in the hallway holding an envelope. I said I can handle the payment. Mark rubbed his forehead. "I know. Then why did you call the card company?" "I called because I wanted to know if they'd lower the rate. On my account. I didn't give them information. That isn't the point." I stepped backward instinctively. Mark saw me. For half a second, I nearly said I would wait outside. Then I remembered. Staying did not mean interfering. I took off my coat. Zach looked embarrassed. "Sorry. You don't need to apologize to me." Mark said, "Daniel, we can go." That surprised me. He was offering me an exit before I asked. "No, finish." Zach folded the envelope. "Dad, moving back here was supposed to help me stop drowning. Not make me 17 again." Mark's face changed. I know I screwed up, Zach continued. I didn't say, you don't have to. Every time you call somebody, offer money, check something, ask if I filled something out, I know what you think. Mark's jaw tightened. What do I think? That I can't handle it. I think you made mistakes. I know. And some of them were serious. I know. So what am I supposed to do? Pretend I don't see them? Zach looked tired. Let me make smaller ones. The sentence stopped all of us. I'm trying to learn how not to panic every time something goes wrong. I can't learn that if you panic first. Mark stared at him. There was no perfect comeback. Fortunately, after a long silence, he said, okay. Zach looked skeptical. I mean it. You say that a lot. So do you. Zach almost smiled. Mark nodded toward the envelope. What's that? My payment confirmation. Mark raised both hands. I am not asking anything else. Good. Zach went upstairs. Mark remained staring at the stairs. Eventually he said, I hate being told I'm making things worse when I'm trying to help. I know. Don't sound pleased. I don't. You do a little. I'm pleased somebody else said it. He looked at me. That is unbelievably annoying. Probably. I walked closer. He still looked upset. Not romantically wounded. Just a father who had been told something he didn't want to hear. I kissed him once. He exhaled. I hate growth. You're doing great. Go away. We have dinner reservations. Unfortunately, he got his coat. A week earlier, that argument would have made me wonder whether Mark had room for me that night. Instead, I understood something simpler. His relationship with Zach didn't have to become my problem in order to affect my life. And my relationship with Mark didn't have to fix theirs in order to survive beside it. On the way out, Mark called upstairs. We're leaving, Zach shouted. Okay. Mark opened the front door, then paused. You staying at your place tonight? There was care in the question. No assumption, no disappointment hidden underneath. I thought about the apartment, the quiet, my bed. Then I thought about Mark, not the house. Not Zach, Mark. Actually, I think I'll stay here. His expression changed only slightly. Enough. Okay, don't make it weird. I'm not. You're smiling. I'm allowed to smile at my boyfriend. I rolled my eyes. He kissed me before we stepped outside. From upstairs, Zach yelled, I can still hear you. Mark laughed against my mouth. For once, I didn't mind. By the 9th week, nobody had moved out. That mattered. Zach was still in the spare room. His work boots still lived by the back door. His cracked mug remained beside the sink. The debt was smaller, but not small. Mark was still Mark. I was still me. And somehow, the relationship had stopped feeling as if it were waiting for someone else's life to clear out of the way. We developed a rhythm without ever sitting down to name it. That helped. If Mark and I had tried to write rules, I probably would have ruined them by making them too precise. Some nights I stayed at his place. Some nights he stayed at mine. Some nights we went home separately even after a good date. Once a week, more or less, I ate dinner with Mark and Zach. Once a week, more or less, Mark and I protected a night that belonged to us. Not because romance needed a calendar to survive, because apparently everything else did. The strange part was how quickly it stopped feeling like compromise. It just became our life. On a Friday, near the end of October, I left the college after a late firing and drove straight to Mark's. I had clay under one thumbnail and a headache from explaining for the 6th time that week that a kiln was not an oven. I wanted a shower. I wanted silence. Mostly I wanted Mark. That surprised me. Not the wanting. The direction of it. A few months earlier, exhaustion would have sent me home. That night, I found myself impatient at red lights because I knew where he was. When Mark opened the door, he wore a gray sweatshirt and reading glasses. Not sexy in any way he would have approved of. My body disagreed. Hi. I kissed him before answering. He made a surprised sound and caught me around the waist. I kept kissing him until my headache became somebody else's problem. When I finally pulled back, he looked pleased with himself. What was that for? I had a bad day. That seems backward. I contain multitudes. You contain clay. That too. He brushed his thumb along the side of my face. Zach is upstairs. I assumed. He's working on an application for a weekend production shift. Good. Mark's hand stayed at my waist. A month earlier, hearing that Zach was home would have changed the temperature of the moment. That night it didn't. The house was not empty. I still wanted Mark. Both facts had finally learned how to occupy the same room. We ordered food. Zach came down halfway through dinner, took a container upstairs and disappeared into an online training module. Nobody made anything of it. Mark and I talked about my students, then his route changes at work, then whether we had the energy to watch a movie. We didn't. At 10, Mark rinsed plates while I dried them. I looked around the kitchen. The same room where Zach had walked in on us. The same refrigerator. The same stairs. Nothing physical had changed. That helped me understand how much of the pressure had lived in the meaning I attached to it. Mark handed me a plate. You're staring. I know. Good stare or bad stare. I haven't classified it. Concerning. I put the plate away. He turned off the faucet. Your place tomorrow? Yeah. Okay. No disappointment. No attempt to negotiate another night. Just okay. That simple word had changed too. Later, in bed, Mark fell asleep first. He always did. I lay beside him listening to the house. Pipes. A car outside. One floorboard upstairs. Zach moving around. I waited for the old tension. It never came. I turned toward Mark. His hand rested open between us. I put mine into it. He closed his fingers without waking. The next week, Zach gave us an update nobody asked for. We were eating pasta. He had become significantly better at making pasta, and significantly worse at pretending he did not care whether we noticed. I'm under 12 now. Mark looked up. 12 what? 1,000. The fork stopped halfway to Mark's mouth. That's good. I know. How much were you? Zach pointed. Mark shut his mouth. I laughed. Mark looked at me. Hostile environment. You created it. Zach smiled. The Saturday shift helps. Mark nodded. That's great. No advice. No offer. No plan. Just that. Zach took another bite. I still probably have 5 months. Mark said. Okay. Zach looked at me. He's getting weirdly good at that. I've been training him. Absolutely not, Mark said. The truth was, I hadn't trained him. Zach had. Life had. Mark had done the difficult part himself. After dinner, Zach left to meet a friend. Mark brought 2 glasses of water into the living room and sat beside me. For a while we didn't speak. Then I said, I've been thinking. That always ends well. I'm serious. So am I. I pushed my foot against his ankle. He smiled. I took a breath. This wasn't a confession. We had said I love you months earlier. That was easy now. This was harder. I don't want to move in next year. Mark's smile faded. Not painfully. Attentively. Okay. I might not want to move in the year after either. He nodded slowly. Okay. You're allowed to have a reaction. I am. You look like you're reading furniture instructions. That's concentration. I laughed. He didn't. Not yet. I need you to know it isn't because I'm waiting to see if we work. We work. I know. Most of the time. Generous. He rubbed a hand over his knee. I used to think moving in was what came next. I know. I mean, not immediately, but eventually. I know. He smiled slightly. There's that word. Sorry. No. This one is okay. He leaned back. I think I thought serious relationships were supposed to get more combined. I waited. More nights. More shared stuff. Same address eventually. If you didn't want that, I heard it as you wanting a limit. My chest tightened. And now? I still think you have limits. That sounds romantic. We all do. That wasn't the answer I expected. Mark looked toward the kitchen. Zach moving back in made me realize something. What? I like having people close, because then I know where I stand with them. I frowned. What does that mean? If you're in my house, I know you're here. That is usually how houses work. Daniel. Sorry. He smiled despite himself. I don't have to wonder if you're pulling away when you're sitting 3 feet from me. Something inside me softened. Not because the statement was polished. Because it wasn't. He had finally said the less flattering version. Sometimes I need to leave so I can tell the difference between missing you and just being used to you. Mark looked at me. That still sounds terrible. I know. I also understand it now. That's inconvenient. Very. We sat there. No speech came. No perfect definition of partnership arrived. Eventually Mark said, I don't need you to live here for this to be serious. Are you sure? No. I laughed. He smiled. I mean it. I'm not sure what I'll want in 5 years. Good. You hate certainty now? I hate fake certainty. That seems reasonable. He touched my knee. I know what I want now. What? You. I rolled my eyes. That was dangerously close to becoming a speech. I stopped. Thank you. He moved closer. I leaned into him. There were still things we had not decided. Maybe there always would be. That no longer felt like failure. It felt like time. A few weeks later, on another Friday, I was at Mark's again. Zach was upstairs. His room no longer looked temporary. The boxes were gone. There were posters on the wall, a cheap desk lamp in the window. Laundry nobody had folded. It was his room now. I stood in the hallway looking at the closed door longer than necessary. Mark came up behind me. You okay? Yeah. He followed my gaze. The room? Yeah. He waited. I smiled. That used to bother me. I noticed. Of course you did. You have 3 faces. I have at least 4 now. Growth. I turned toward him. He put his hands lightly at my waist. Downstairs, the television was still on. Outside, somebody laughed on the sidewalk. Nothing about the night was especially romantic. That was part of why it was. Mark said, You staying? A few months earlier, the question would have carried everything. Future. Commitment. Pressure. Proof. That night, it was just a question. I thought about my apartment, my bed, the quiet waiting there. Then, I thought about Mark. Not the house. Not Zach. Not what staying meant. Just Mark. Tonight? I said. Yeah. I smiled. Yeah. His face changed only slightly. Enough. He kissed me. No announcement. No promise beyond the night in front of us. Upstairs, Zach moved around in the spare room. The door stayed closed. The room stayed occupied. And for the first time, I did not need it empty to believe there was space for me.